Baruch Hashem, it cooled down. That doesn't mean that Moshiach left us. It's just that he's being nice and kind. The theme of the whole Yarchei Kallah, at least of my classes, we were doing over here was all on the word Oz. The Aleph and the Zayin. Number 8. The Pasuk, I mentioned many psukim, but one of the psukim were Oz ahapech el ha'amim. Then Hashem will convert the nations. And the idea that we had mentioned was it has to do with number 8, Oz. But again, number 8 is not made up of 8, it's made out of 1 and 7. And the idea being that the messianic process, Moshiach unfolding in the world, is related through a super powerful, transcendental, miraculous energy, but that does not overwhelm and dismiss nature, but works with nature. It works in the world and through the world. So when you're seeing something that is nothing less than a miracle, but at the same time, it's all just normal, even though it's the most abnormal thing, that's Moshiach. So if you take a look, the Rebbe, when the Rebbe in 1991, Shabbos Parshas Bereishis, this is in Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Nun Aleph, page 73, he's talking about the great wonders of Moshiach. And the Rebbe uses these words, Ledugma, b'medinos gedolos v'chazakos, in very great countries, in great empires, powerful empires. Hoilchem u'mishtanim sidrei hashilton. It is continuously, there's a process of sidrei hashilton, of the order of the government or the of the ruling power, v'hamishtar, and the governing power is changing l'toiv. It's changing for good. Toiv tzedek v'yosher, which is a dugma and a hachana l'tikun v'shleimus ha'olam b'yamois HaMashiach. And the Rebbe is particularly referring to the change that happened in the Soviet Union. A government changed. But the Rebbe is emphasizing very strongly that it all happened kind of without any influence from above. They're letting out, he goes on to say, millions of Jews are being let out, and not only let out of Russia, but they're being assisted by the government, in which they're spending their tax money, the Rebbe says, and it's coming from tax money it's coming from all the people. So it's almost like the entire previous Soviet Union is helping the Jewish people. And the Rebbe says it's without external interference. It's just happening naturally. That's Moshiach. So let's take a look for a moment at what we've been talking about the last couple of days. That's Aleph, a superpower. Erenu nifla'os, it's the wonder, but it's part of creation. That's the magic. It's the fusion of a lakus, of the Eibishter and the world. The impossible and the possible. It's all coming together in a magical, magnificent way. So when we take a look and we say, hey, the transformations in the world that we're seeing the last 3 years, take the United States, the complete shift, the entire country moving in a complete opposite direction than it went before. It was impossible. All the pundits and everybody was saying it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't only going to happen, it was a laughter. People were laughing at the possibility, at the absurdness of something like that happening. Today they have these videos you can watch on YouTube where they put together like a collage of different pieces of what the experts were saying, going through one after another, from big politicians, from experts, and how they laugh and they say it's impossible, it's a joke. And then you watch the night of, and you watch the mouths open, you watch the impossible come, and like, wow. Well, the exact same thing I hear happened over here in Australia in your last election as well. The Poles were completely wrong. The whole thing happened. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it happened. And what just happened in England? It wasn't either supposed to happen, and it happened. I mean, we are watching the most amazing things exactly repeat of what the Rebbe is saying, and that's exactly Oz. Oz ahapach el amim. Then I'm going to convert the nations. Aleph and Zion. 1 and 7. And now we go to our kleine landele. We go to our own little country, Eretz Yisrael, because we left Eretz Yisrael out of all of this, now all of our talking. And here we stand already. I don't know exactly if it's over a year or around a year. And our country of Eretz Yisrael, what they call Medinat Yisrael, doesn't have any government. The strangest thing. While these massive changes are taking place in the world, Eretz Yisrael does not have a government. And they can't figure it out. No matter what they do, it keeps on falling apart. They tried once. They tried twice. And I think they're going now on their third round. And it's wird nicht. And based on the political scene of what it looks like, they're going to be in the same stuck in that same problem like they've been. They're not going to resolve it. It's the strangest thing. Like, what's going on? How come they can't put together a government? Let me share with you, the one that's kind of causing this impasse is a fellow by the name of Avigdor Lieberman. Why? Because he's got this massive chunk of the right side, and he does not want to sit together with the Frum Yidden, with the Charedim. So therefore, there is a great majority in Israel that is happy with the policies of not an inch of Eretz Yisrael, no negotiations, and so on and so forth. But there's infighting. They can't put it together. So Avigdor Lieberman said, I don't remember, I don't have the dates. I was researching rather the Sichas today, and I didn't have a chance to get to researching the exact date of when he said this. But he said it sometime, I think, before the elections, before Pesach. And his announcement was that we will not allow a government, we will not allow a government to rule Israel like it was in the days of David HaMelech. That's what he said. We will not allow a government. Again, he's fighting not to allow the Charedim to run the government. So why didn't he say we will not allow Bnei Barak to run the Israeli government? He doesn't say that. He said we will not allow a government that is the same like the government of David HaMelech. Strange thing. As we say, like there is a statement that says that that he niba v'lo yada ma niba. He's prophesizing and he doesn't know what he's saying. Mazlai hu chazi, his mazel sees. Now on that very same day or the next day, I see an article in the news. This time it's coming from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu makes another statement. His statement is, we are not going to allow a government halach that's based on halacha. We're not going to have a theocracy in Eretz Yisrael, because some of the people were presenting the idea of having the possibility of a government run by halacha. So the Prime Minister said, this is shtiyot, we're not going to do that. And they keep on talking about the messianics. The crazy messianics, that's the lashon they use. The crazy messianics who are dreaming of like messianical ideas, we're not going to let that happen. It's amazing. So when you open up Hilchos Melachem of the Rambam, Laws of Kings, chapter 11. By the way, it's interesting how the halachis of Moshiach in Rambam is in Perek Yud Aleph. In Sefer Yeshayahu, we have in which Perek are the nevuos of Melech HaMoshiach, V'yotzer choytem igeza Yishai. Also in Perek Yud Aleph. It's interesting. Everything is Yud Aleph for a reason. You can figure it out on your own. In any case, in Perek Yud Aleph, the opening word, the Rambam gives you a full list of what Moshiach needs to do. It's a job description of what he needs to accomplish. What's the first thing the Rambam? The first thing on the list, HaMelech HaMashiach Osid Lamoid. Mashiach is going to get up, Ulahachzir Malchus Beis David, to return the Davidic kingdom, lemamshala harishayna, to its original power. Okay? Victor Lieberman is saying, we're not going back. I'm not letting. We're not going back to a memshala like it is in the days of David HaMelech. And what is Netanyahu saying? We're not going to allow a theocracy, a government run by halacha. What's the next words in Rambam? V'choizrin kol hamishpatim, and all the laws, all the Torah laws which governed Eretz Yisrael back then is going to be implemented. So they're sensing and they're feeling something, and meanwhile they can't put it together. So we know that what the Gemara says, which perhaps could be connected to this, the Gemara Masechta Sanhedrin. The Masechta Sanhedrin, the Gemara says that they asked Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, when is Moshiach coming? And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma said he doesn't want to tell them because he knows that they're going to ask him for a sign. In the end, whatever, he consents. It's strange because he does give them a sign, so I don't really understand the Gemara, but he says when this shar that's over here, this gateway is going to collapse, it's going to be built, it's going to fall apart again, and then it's not going to be built the third time, until Mashiach is going to appear. That's what it says in the Gemara. So which shar is he referring to? So Rashi says it's talking about to a certain shar that's in Rome. He's talking about a certain gate in Rome that the Marsha, look in the Marsha. The Marsha says no, because Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma wasn't in Rome. So he says we're talking about in Eretz Yisrael, that there is a shar that is going to be built and collapse. And we know that where do the elders, where do the leading power reside? Shoiftim v'shoitrim titein lecha. Rulers you should give to you. B'chol sha'arecha. So it's not far-fetched that Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma was talking about something that's happening now in front of our eyes. Again, I don't know, I didn't research this, and I'm not into the statements of this Kabbalist or that Kabbalist, but there is the rumor that Rav Kaduri said something about a impasse in forming a government in Eretz Yisrael, and that's a sign that we're holding mamish by Bias HaMashiach. But one thing is really interesting. All this unbelievable transformations happening in the entire world, and Eretz Yisrael, sorry to say, is bamacht. They can't get out of it. It's a really, really strange situation. Now, to me, again, it seems like the reason there is no government is because the space has been cleared. It's time for Melech HaMoshiach, like the Rebbe himself said when one of the people came to ask him during when the government had fallen apart back then and they couldn't form a government, and someone tells it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, meanwhile, I'm kind of, doesn't bother, something like this doesn't bother me so much that there's no government, because I am waiting for Moshiach to become the prime minister in Eretz Yisrael. So really interesting. So they can't make a government and there's a vacancy. It's stunning. It's stunning. We come to Tafshin Pei, the year of the eights, and we're standing at an impasse. They can't form a government. Now what's with us? Can we all sit and decide and say, nice, wonderful? Okay, so let Moshiach take over. Or do we somehow get involved? Should Jews get involved in this process? In other words, in the revelation of Melech HaMoshiach, in his galus, in his revelation, maybe it does require an active participation of the Jewish people, or maybe at least if we want to have a schus to be involved, or chas v'shom to sit and wait whenever it's going to happen. Meanwhile, we don't have to talk about the tragedy that just happened and the suffering that happens. So maybe it is time for some kind of an awakening. Now, traditionally, when we're talking about Moshiach coming and Moshiach being revealed, what's the process of that? How do we identify? How is Moshiach's coming told or announced to the Jewish people? So for most Jews, and this is the way we've grown up and everybody's always kind of thought of it this way, we have the grand announcer. That's Eliyahu Hanavi, who Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come to the Jewish people, And he's going to announce and tell the Yidden that within the next 3 days, Moshiach is coming. And when I was a kid, I used to sometimes imagine this, like, well, he will come and he's be a long beard, he will come to the, you think Eliyahu Hanavi with his robes and his sandals and whatever, with a turban, like we are expecting him when we open up the door on Pesach by night, and he's going to come, somehow he's going to come to all the shuls at the same time, and he's going to say, and Yidden will go and dance, and there will be, all right, Mashiach is coming. Or maybe he will blow a shofar. Just a few months ago, I was speaking to a cousin of mine, and she was very close to her grandfather, and her grandfather was my great uncle. And she told me a story that her grandfather told her about the story that happened by my Eltezede in their shtetl in Galicia. There's a city called Dembitz, and that's where my mishpacha comes from. So one time it was Pesach by night, and the people were all sitting by the Seder. Now what happened is that one of the Yidden on the town that was somehow, I forgot, but he was involved in a particular communal element of preparing Pesach. Could be he had the matzah factory in his place, he ran it. I'm not exactly sure what it was that he was, maybe he was the sheikhet. My Zayda was the sheikhet, so I don't think I don't know, maybe there was another sheikhet. I'm not exactly sure what this person's occupation was that kept him very, very occupied and very busy, that he didn't sleep a few days before Pesach. So Pesach by night, he came to shul, and he fell asleep during davening. After shul, he fell asleep. Everybody left the shul, and he was sleeping. Now meanwhile, the shamus left and didn't notice him. So the shamus went and locked the shul, but he locked it from the outside. They had a big lock, and he locked the shul. This guy is sleeping well, he's exhausted. It's 11 o'clock at night or so, close to midnight, and he wakes up. And he can't leave the shul. He's stuck. And he realizes, Pesach, he has to go home. His family's waiting, they're probably going, and he's not. So he's trying to leave the shul, doors are locked. Every way he tries, he can't get out of the shul. He panics. What is he going to do? So he finds, in the bima, he found a shofar. So he has an alarm. He takes the shofar. Now this is about 12 o'clock at night. I was at midnight when we're eating afikoymen, exactly at the time when people are opening up their doors for Eliyahu Hanavi, and this Yid blew shofar, and he was frustrated. So he blew with all this, and suddenly the people, you see the head sticking out, and everybody's looking, and people start coming out of their home, and then they see that the sound of the shofar is coming from the shul. And the door was locked, the whole thing, and the whole place was sure that Eliyahu Hanavi is here, Mashiach came. So that's the way we've expected Mashiach to always come. And that's how it would be announced. But we know that there is another description. There's various different descriptions of how it can happen. So there is a description in Yalkut Shimoni. In the description of Yalkut Shimoni, and not just in this medrash, but there's other midrashim as well. On primary, one more medrash, and a medrash Rabbi in Shir Hashirim, in where the announcement about the coming of Moshiach is not coming from Eliyahu Hanavi, but it's coming from Moshiach Tzidkenu himself. Okay? What does it say? So the medrash in Yalkut Shimoni says like this. This is in Yeshaya Nun Tes. Here we are. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Yitzchak is so connected to Mashiach as we spoke yesterday. Shana shemelech HaMashiach nigla boy. The year that Melech HaMashiach is revealed. Kol malchei umay sa'olam izgarim zeh bezeh. All the nations of the world are provoking each other. There is some kind of a provocation, some kind of a unrest happening in the world. Melech Paras mizgare b'melech Arvi. The king of Persia is intimidating the king of Arabia. Okay? And it goes on to describe that, and because the king of Arabia is frightened, so he goes to Aram. He goes to the place called Aram, litol eitzamehem, to take counsel from them. The Chayzer Melech Paras umachriv es kol. Okay, then it says that Melech Paras destroys the world. Okay, and then it's an interesting thing. He destroys the world, and afterwards he destroys the world. Everybody is so scared. It says in the Medrash. So we have to understand the destroying of the world not to mean literally. V'chol umoy sa'olam misrashim, and everybody suddenly is terrified. Umizbalim, and is confused. V'noiflam al paneim, and they fall on their faces. V'yoichesu oisam tzirim kitsure yalei, then they get like birth pangs. The Yisrael, and particularly the Jewish people, are terrified. Umizbalim v'oim lehechen nava and lehechen nelech. Where should we walk? Where should we go? V'am lehem, and he says to them, Banai, my children, al tisro, don't be afraid. Kol masha asisi, everything I have done, lo yasisi elo b'shvilchem. Whatever I have done, I've only, the Eibishter says to the Jewish people, don't be afraid. Everything I've done, I've only done for your sake. Mipnei ma'atem misyarim, don't be afraid. That's his main message. Don't be afraid. Al tiro, don't be afraid. Again, higiaz mangulaschem, the time of your redemption has arrived. Okay, the Medrash goes on and say, this is not like the old redemption. This redemption is going to be a permanent redemption forever and ever. So this is a message coming from the Eibishter. The Eibishter tells the Jewish people, there will be some kind of unrest happening in the Middle East involving Persia, Arabia, and a country called Aram. And then as a result of that, the world will be terrified, particularly the Jewish people will be scared. The Eibishter will tell the Jewish people, don't be afraid, the time of your redemption has arrived. How exactly will the Eibishter communicate that to us? Doesn't say in the Medrash. We would have to believe that the Eibishter would communicate that to us in the manner that the Eibishter communicates all times when Hashem communicates, other than the Torah that was given then, when the Eibishter is communicating at any given time to tell Yidden a message, through a Navi. No, that's the way the Eibishter communicates. He sends a Navi to tell the Jewish people about this. Okay. Then the Medrash continues. Shanu Rabbi Seinu, our teachers learnt. B'shah shemelech HaMashiach ba, at the time that Melech HaMashiach comes. Now hear the difference. The first time it says, Shana shemelech HaMashiach nigla boi, the year that Melech HaMashiach is revealed. Now the Medrash, it's like a new Medrash. The next passage. Our rabbis taught, the time, at the actual time, Shemelech HaMashiach ba, that Melech HaMashiach comes. Oimeid al gag Beis HaMikdash, he stands on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, v'mashmiya lehem liYisrael, and he relates to the Jewish people, v'oimer, and he says to them, Anovim higiaz mangulaschem, my humble ones, the time of redemption has arrived. So those words are not made by Mordechai ben David. Anovim higiaz mangulaschem is in the Medrash. It's what Moshiach Tzidkeinu says to the Jewish people at the time when he comes. He gives them this Besura. Higiaz mangulaschem. And then he says in interesting words. Very interesting words. Again, Moshiach Tzidkeinu himself is telling the Jewish people the time of redemption has arrived. And this made it in, the next words also made it into Mordechai ben David's song. V'm'ein atem ma'aminim, and if you don't believe me, okay, that means there's a possibility that he won't be believed. V'm'ein atem ma'aminim, but you don't believe me, take a look. Re'u ba'oiri shezareach. Look at my light that is shining. So obviously we're talking about a time and a situation where you need Mashiach himself to tell the people to look at his light that is shining. His light is not this blinding physical light that everybody sees shining from his face. They say, oh, that's for sure Mashiach Tzidkeinu. It's a time that you need Mashiach to tell the Jewish people, look at my light that is shining. Fine. And on this it says, Kumi Oiri. So here there's a description that Moshiach himself is involved in the Besuras HaGeula. Now, in 1990, in the summer of 1990, this Medrash started circling amongst the Jewish people. What happened at that time? Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, went and entered, the Iraqi army entered into Kuwait with the intention of annexing Kuwait, and he was threatening Saudi Arabia. At that time, the Saudis were terrified. They called for the United States, and Bechlal, the world's economy, was so dependent on the oil, and the last thing we wanted is that it should fall into the tyrant of Saddam Hussein. So what happened was, there was first a great fear of what's going to be now, because Iraq at that time was a formidable army. And not only that, they had ties with The U.S., at that time, it was at the transition state. Russia was changing, and it changed, but still, they had connections. And if you mess with Iraq, you never know who can come to their assistance. Before you know, this thing can go spiral completely out of control, and this can become World War III. There was a fear. So, at that point, President Bush put together a massive coalition, and they threatened Iraq that they better get out of Kuwait. Iraq went and said, you mess with me, I'm going to send biological and chemical weapons, and if you don't believe me, I've done it before. He didn't say that, but I am going to hit Israel with biological and chemical weapons. So that was enough to send all Yidden in Eretz Yisrael into a panic attack. And I remember when I was there, they were giving out the gas masks, and everybody was preparing for the worst nightmare. Okay, across the world, it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 770. And the Rebbe suddenly, in the summer of 1990, the first week was Parshas Re'eh, I think Shabbos Mevorchem El, as the Rebbe quoted this medrash. Now there's actually a story before that. As the Rebbe was walking out of 770, someone went and took this medrash earlier and posted it on the back wall of 770. This medrash, starting with Omer Rebbe Yitzchak, that the Eibishter says, don't be afraid. But the person went to the end of that part when the Eibishter says, don't be afraid. The Rebbe walked by, yes, the Rebbe saw it. A little while later, the person who hung up that sign was contacted by the maskiras, by the secretary, and they asked, how come you didn't post the conclusion of the medrash? What's the conclusion of the medrash? The second part, where it says that not only is the Eibishter going to give a Besura, but Moshiach Tzidkenu is also going to give the Besura. That's what the Rebbe's, again, the secretaries asked this question. I don't think it was on the secretary's mind why the second part of the Medrash wasn't there. So obviously they're asking the question. It was coming from the Rebbe. Why the second part of the Medrash wasn't there? Fine. That Shabbos, or Shabbos Parshas Re'eh, the Rebbe brings this Medrash, and the Rebbe attaches it to, one second, here we are. The Rebbe attaches it to what's happening. Now the Rebbe clarifies, even though it says Melech Paras, the king of Iran, Paras is usually Iran, so the Rebbe says that it's Kollel, the Rebbe says in Ha'ara, it's Kollel, the word Paras includes Shetach Shenikra Iraq. It includes the Shetach, the area that's also called Iraq, that's included in Melech Paras. And the Rebbe goes on to explain that Melech Paras is going to start with Melech Arvi, which is Arabia. The Saudi Arabians are going to go to Aram. So Aram, the Rebbe teaches us, not over here in the first meeting, that Aram means superpowers. Aram comes from the word Roimemus, superpower. In another Sikha, over here in Parshas Nitzavim Vayelech, the Rebbe adds, and the Rebbe said, brings a different girsa, brings them Bialka Shemaini. It says when they're going to go to Aram, the Rebbe brings Ube Psikta Sham in Ara 64, that they're going to go LeEdoim. They're going to go to the Edomites, which is interesting because we've been talking all this time that Edom is the United States of America and the Europeans. So if I needed a validation for that, the Rebbe is associating who they went to. They went to the United States and they formed a coalition with France and Britain and all this kind of Edom descendants to come and assist them. Now when the Rebbe brings the Medrash, the Rebbe brings both parts of the Medrash. He brings the Medrash of the Eibishter telling the Jewish people. The Rebbe says, "Ubefrat as shein mekuyim gevarim." The simonim in Chazal that is man hagolos. Also the simon in Yalkut Shemaini. He goes and he quotes the entire Medrash. The only thing he leaves out is he leaves out the part that Paras destroys the world. The Rebbe never quoted that about destruction. The Rebbe like omits it as if it never existed in that Medrash. Then he says, in der Nacht, Shanu Rabbi Seinu, our Rebbe said that Melech HaMashiach will stand on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash. Then the Rebbe says as follows, and hear very clearly these words. Kein tia lanu, just so should be to us. As mahat melachatchila nisht was sich zu schrecken. From the very beginning, we shouldn't get scared. The Rebbe is telling the Jewish people, don't be afraid. We have already Hashem's promise. Al tira'u, don't be afraid. Digias mangulascha. Okay. V'chein tia lanu. Okay. So the Rebbe is saying like this, there is two. We have already the promise of the Eibishter, which is what? That don't be afraid. V'chein tia lanu, it should also be for us, as Moshiach tzedkenu zo b'poyel kimin, that Moshiach should come, and he should stand on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, and he should announce, and he should notify the Jewish people as Mashiach Hashem gekumen. Amen ken yiratze. When you learn the Sikha and you medayek in the words, it seems like the Rebbe is speaking on two parts of the Medrash. Regarding to the first part, which speaks about the year that Melech HaMoshiach is going to reveal himself, we're going to have a haftacha coming from we're going to have a scare, and a haftacha and a promise coming from the Eibishter, my humble ones, don't be afraid. That's number one. That the Rebbe seems to be applying as that's something that's happening currently in the year 1990, in the summer of 1990. But then he says, we should be zoiche to what? That Mashiach should come. B'pashtus is referring to the second part of the Medrash. That b'shosha melech HaMashiach ba, at the time that Mashiach comes, he stands on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash and he tells the Jewish people, Hanavim egiya zman gulaschem. That you have in the end of 1990. Well, this continues into Tafshin Nun Aleph, which at that time, which is still 1990, because 1991 is only going to come in January. But on the Jewish calendar, it became already 57, 51. So the Rebbe keeps Shabbosim after Shabbos Bereishis. The Rebbe brings this, what's happening over there. And Misimone b'mufretz aparsi, Misimone HaGeula, Malchus Mizgarois, fine. And it's referring on the Shetach Shekula Iraq. That's what I mentioned to you. The whole world is afraid, fine. And then Umamshechu Messiah, and he continues that B'shasha Melech HaMashiach ba, he stands on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, he tells the Jewish people, Egiya zman gulaschem, fine. Now, by the way, here is something really amazing. Because the biggest difficulty we have, other than Gimel Tammuz, is that we have a problem that this thing was said 30 years ago, and after all this that happened, we saw such a denigration, particularly in matters that the Rebbe was fighting about, was Shleimus Haaretz. Okay, we saw Oslo happened after this, and we saw global terrorism. We saw Gush Katif, that Eretz Yisrael. We saw the whole formation of Gaza. All these horrible things happening afterwards. It's interesting. The Rebbe speaks about that right over here. On the other hand, on these days, the Rebbe says, the nations of the world, b'oifen of the 70 nations are getting together, b'oifen the rakshu goyim, nations are tummeling, ulu'umim yehegu, they're speaking, they're conspiring to what? Al Hashem val Mashiach, against Hashem and against Mashiach, regarding to what? To claim against the Jewish people that we are thieves, list them out then. Not only regards to Gaza, the Rebbe says, or Shomron, or even Shomron, Elegam l'chol eroish b'negeya l'Yehuda Kollel Yerushalayim, that they're coming against Yerushalayim. And the Rebbe says what's even a bigger wonder, that part of the nations that are ganging up against small little Israel, that are ganging up against the Jewish people, generally, the Rebbe says, they're people of tzedek v'yosher. They fight for human rights, they're fighting for this. And dafka regarding the Jewish people, they're willing to do an injustice. That's what he says. Dafka regarding the Yidden, they're trying to take away from them the land that belongs to them. And the Rebbe says, v'yesh loymar, the Rebbe says, how can that be? It's because the Seder in the world is that when the light is about to happen, there is a great darkness that precedes the light. Fine. And the Rebbe says, Mezonish Nespolve, and don't get so tzikratzt about this. Let's not get so shooken up about this. Why? Because it's ein Nespol Mezeh, because Kivan she'ein ze'ela rik. What does it say in the pasuk? It says, L'umim yehegu, they talk rik, emptiness. It's emptiness, it's nothing. And the Rebbe says, why? Because Yoshev Bashamayim Yischok, der Eibishter lacht sich ois, der Eibishter laughs. Hashem Yilag Lamai, the Eibishter will make a mockery out of them. All the words of the Rebbe are, we're going to soon see, the Rebbe himself spoke about it, are prophecies. What has been going on in these 2 years of Sichas is unbelievable. If we learn them now and see what's happening in the world, Sicha by Sicha, word for word, it's all like speaking. I mean, it's a shame that it's taking 20, 30 years, but it's mamash materializing. But the interesting thing is that when the Rebbe is talking about a war against Yerushalayim, when did it reach its peak? In the last year of the Obama administration. And when did it reach its peak of its peak? In the late December and January of 2016 going into 2017, when they had that convention on Jerusalem and Paris. And right at that point, the Eibishter, as I mentioned the other day, spun the dreidel, and at Azoi oisgelacht, because when Trump became president, there was the biggest laughter. It was the Eibishter I mentioned last time. It's Hashem laughing. Their whole plans, everything that they were so sure they have already, it was made ashen porach. The whole thing was blown up in their faces. Okay, that's mentioned over here, but that's a side note. In Parshas Chayesara, my intention in today's class is to talk about the advancement of this Besuras HaGeula. Let's see how it unfolds throughout the year. And let's see how the Rebbe changes his approach to what is happening based on, obviously, the time passing. In Parshas Chayesara, the Rebbe himself, again, there's a few other mentions, but in Parshas Chayesara, the Rebbe brings again the Medrash, and he brings both Midrashim. And then the Rebbe says like this, and the Rebbe says that this is happening, this is ready in Niskayim, kefi shehechrizu, as it has been announced, umachrizim b'miyuchid la'achroina. And particularly recently, it is currently being announced. So he's talking about twice announcement. It was announced, and it's being announced. It's currently being announced. What's this twice announcement? What's the twice announcement? So, b'pashtus, he's talking about the two parts of the Medrash. The first announcement is the Eibishter's assurance to the Jewish people. The Eibishter's assurance to the Jewish people, which is B'shana shemelech HaMoshiach nigla bo, in the year that Melech HaMoshiach reveals himself. So that was announced. When was it announced? The Rebbe's been announcing it from Parshas Re'eh all the weeks. The Rebbe's comforting the Jewish people, not just publicly, but individually. When the Rebbe is telling all the Yidden, don't be afraid, Eretz Yisrael is the safest place, go back to Eretz Yisrael. Mamish, you're consulting the same exact way that Jews came to Elisha Hanavi, to Eliyahu Hanavi, to the greatest of prophets, to ask regarding questions. The Rebbe stands on the line. If you want, it's amazing that we can watch a Navi in operation. Yidden are coming with life and death questions, mamish life matters, regarding the safety of themselves and their children. People that don't have to be in Eretz Yisrael. When there is such a threat, they have other places to be, and the Rebbe is encouraging, go, don't be afraid, nothing, it's the safest place. So much so, I was a bacher then, I came home from Eretz Yisrael because for a shidduch, a whole story with the Rebbe gave an amazing answer regarding my shidduch then at that time. And but then afterwards, once I was there already, my father didn't let me go back, okay? Because he was worried. My father kept me home. So I was then at that time learning in Mira Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. This was at my transitioning stage to Lubavitch. I was learning in Mira Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. So when I was in Borough Park for a few months, I studied in a makeshift yeshiva from all the Bachrim who ran away. All the Bachrim who came. So we all learned in a shul. So while I'm learning there, and the war started, and Scuds were hitting Eretz Yisrael. So I had my, I think I mentioned this last time I was here. I had my, a person who was a teacher of mine years before, a Satmar Chassid, and he came over to me, and he knew already that I'm already hanging out with the Lubavitchers. And he said to me, he says, "Just to wissen," he says, "Jeder Scud was fault of Eretz Yisrael. Every Scud falling on Eretz Yisrael is falling on 770. This is what he said to me. Like, how does it ever go and take such an achrayus? Now you see Scuds are falling. And you know, as Chassidim, we were also bewildered a little bit because we didn't expect that to happen. The Rebbe didn't say Scuds won't fall. The Rebbe says the safest place. And what happens? The safest place. Scuds fell, 39 Scuds fell, buildings collapsed, and everybody walked out, and nothing happened. So it was really amazing. The only injuries that happened were from people who sadly got scared, and in their panic attacks, people died. But not mitzad and that's what the Rebbe is trying to prevent in any case. So over here, there is the announcement which was made till now, but then the Rebbe says, umachrizim, and is being announced now. Is it possible that the Rebbe is referring to the second announcement where the Medrash says that this is being done by Melech HaMoshiach himself? Well, let's take a look in the Ha'ara. So you see that the Rebbe is clearly referring to that. Why? Because it says that second announcement is going to come from where? Al Gag Beis HaMikdash. Mashiach stands on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, and he tells the Jewish people, Chevre, don't be afraid, Igi Azman Gulaschem. So the Rebbe says that, why does it emphasize the roof of the Beis HaMikdash? Why the roof of the Beis HaMikdash? You simply want to say because Mashiach is holding a bullhorn, he's standing high up on a high place, he wants everybody to hear him. So he's standing on the roof so everybody can hear him. But the Rebbe says another reason why it says he's standing on the roof. The roofs were the only part of the Beis HaMikdash that doesn't have Kedusha. It doesn't, and therefore this is Meramis, that the announcement that's coming is not coming from the Beis HaMikdash, literally in Yerushalayim that's standing, but it's coming from a place that's Beis HaMikdash, but does not have Kedushas HaBeis HaMikdash in the literal halachic sense. What this is hinting, that the announcement, this announcement, where is it coming from, the Rebbe says? It's coming michutz la'aretz. It's coming from outside of Eretz Yisrael. It's coming from Chutz La'aretz, which did not become sanctified with the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. Similar to the difference between the Gag Beis HaMikdash. Here the Rebbe says just that. In Kunteris Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel, the Rebbe adds a tiny little knetch to this idea that the announcement of Moshiach, that is announcing it on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, does not mean the Beis HaMikdash, and that this announcement happens after already we have the Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe says, I'll tell you why, very simple. It can't be that this announcement happens from the Beis HaMikdash mamish. Very simple. Because if the Beis HaMikdash is standing already, don't you think the people know already that Moshiach came? Imagine, you have the third Beis HaMikdash on the place of Al-Aqsa, right? On that place, imagine, we have 3 billion Muslims that are going to go crazy if we raise that building there and put our Beis HaMikdash. So obviously, if our Beis HaMikdash is standing there already, so you need Mashiach Tzidkenu to say and yell, hello, everybody, Mashiach is here. Of course, the Geula is here. So the Rebbe says, must be that this is not talking about after the Beis HaMikdash is standing. This is a hachraza from Beis HaMikdash, as Beis HaMikdash is in the time of Golus, like the Rebbe explains in Tav Shenun Beis, in Kunteris Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel, that the Beis HaMikdash, there is a Beis HaMikdash in Bavel, which is the bias of the Nasi Hador. And the Rebbe teaches out at 770, because when the Rebbe says, like it's being announced from Chutz La'aretz, who's the Rebbe referring to? Who's announcing? Who's the person announcing in Chutz La'aretz? Who is that announcer? We know who the announcer is. There was one voice at that time telling the Jewish people, don't be afraid. Higi Azman Gulaschem. Okay, one can argue, say it's a little knetch, a little kvetch. Machrizim, it's announced already, it has announced. So it changes. You continue it throughout the weeks as we're leading up. So we get further a few months later, we get to Parshas Mishpatim, Parshas Nosoi. Parshas Nosoi, this is already again, so we're talking already Shavuos time. Nice few months later. Now, by the way, everything the Navi said is going to happen, happened. Exactly like the Medrash said. People were scared, they were terrified. In the end, the war, first of all, didn't turn into a world war. Secondly, Eretz Yisrael was completely safe. Thirdly, the war was miraculous. Saddam Hussein was defeated in an incredible way so quickly. Like everybody thought it would be a major military confrontation. He called it the mother of all wars. Just wait. And then he was defeated, and the Rebbe goes and pens a letter, even though the Rebbe spoke about it in many sichos. But one of the places so beautiful, the Rebbe in Chaf Hei Adar that year, right after Purim, the Rebbe wrote a whole letter to the Jewish people that we should see that it was fulfilled already what the Medrash says, and that the nisim that the Eibishter does, he says, are even bigger than the nisim of Purim, because they're not concealed in nature. You can see clearly what the Eibishter has done in such a miraculous, open way. And the Rebbe seems to be saying in that letter is that, okay, so this Medrash was fulfilled. Because when you ask the question, hold it, the Rebbe was pointing to this Yalkut Shemaini as one of the Simanim of the Geula. Now we Jewish people have what in history? went through so many hypes, so many ups and downs, so many moments when we expected Mashiach to come, and we had Mamare Chazal kind of, it looked like that this was it. And in the end, it didn't happen. So many people say that what? The Rebbe spoke of a certain medrash, hoping that it could be applied to the situation, and if in the end it didn't happen, it didn't happen. Because, you know what, it's 30 years later, and Mashiach isn't here yet, but the Rebbe said that happened, right? So it's problematic. It's a real problem. So let's see how the Rebbe himself viewed it. Did the Rebbe view it as that medrash not happening? Or did the Rebbe view it as the medrash occurred? Now we think that when it says, Shana Shemelech HaMashiach Nigla Boi, the year that Mashiach is revealed, or Shana Shemelech HaMashiach Ba, that means that the redemption happens. That's the way we understand. That's the way, simply looking at it, you look at it as the redemption happened. What's the redemption? The redemption is that all the Yidden are transported to Eretz Yisrael, and we have the third Beis HaMikdash. That's the redemption. But that's not necessarily what it says. It says the year that Mashiach is revealed, that means you can identify him. Nigla Boy, he's revealed as Mashiach Tzidkenu. Shosha Melech HaMashiach Ba, the hour in which Mashiach comes, doesn't say that you would think, that means that he's coming to redeem the Jewish people b'payil mamish. Is that have to be so? Maybe not. When Moshe Rabbeinu came to Mitzrayim, the Geula didn't come. Moshe came. The Goyel came. The Geula happened later. But the coming of the Goyel, that happened. So let's see if the Rebbe learns that way. I mean, obviously we're small little nobodies, but we have a big, ginormous Rebbe. And he tells us how to look at everything. How did the Rebbe look at it? So we take a look at Parshas Nosai, and we see like this. The Rebbe says over there, especially this year, Ubahagdam, Amavur B'kama Pamim, Kallah Simonim Shebedivrei Chadaz on page 595 in Sefer Asichas Tafshin Nun Aleph Chelik Beis. It says Al Kaponim Shebedivrei Chazal Oides Achris Hayamim regarding the end of days. Doireinu Zehu Doira Achrin Shel Agolos. Our generation is the last generation of the Golos. Fine, like the Friedrich Rebbe already said. Fine, and and this is emphasized even more this year. The Rebbe says. Why? Because this year is the year, as we says in Tinasei Malchusai, that Moshiach's kingdom is manifest and revealed. B'chol ha'olam kulai, for the entire world. And therefore, Maschil Manaflois, Shekvaro, that we've already seen, B'poyel, Le'ene Kol Amen B'shana Zu, we saw it in this year, Shebehem Niskaimu, it has already been fulfilled. Divrei HaYalkut Shemoini, the words of the Yalkut Shemoini, what? Two things. Shana Shemelech HaMashiach Nigla Boi, this confrontation and scare, and the comforting of the Eibishter to the Jewish people, that happened already. The Rebbe emphasized, this is coming from the Eibishter. Bonai al Tisro, don't be afraid. Ume'oz, and from then, from when? Ubefrat b'chodesh Nisan, particularly this last month of Nisan, Chodesh HaGeula, Oindim Kvar, we're standing already at the time of B'shah Shemelech HaMoshiach Ba, not anymore the year that Mashiach hopefully will reveal himself. We're standing at the time that Melech HaMoshiach Ba, Melech HaMoshiach comes. Hine Zeh Ba, behold he is coming. Umashmiya lehem liyisrael, and he's telling the Jewish people, v'oimer, and he says, Anavim igiyaz mangulaschem, my humble ones, the time of redemption has arrived. So the Rebbe seems clearly to be saying that this happened. Now this is not enough. Parshas Balak, you see it even stronger. Same Parshas Balak. The Rebbe says over here, Shaboyke, he brings both midrashim. Va'ad shelashah melech hamashiach ba, and he notifies the Jewish people l'giyaz man gulaschem. Va'ad lahachraza, ultimately to the ultimate announcement. Hine zeh melech hamashiach ba, which is referring to the other medrash, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And here the Rebbe says, so much so shekvar ba, that he came already. Hainu sha'oindim kvar, we're standing on the actual beginning of the Geula of Yemois HaMashiach, asafas cholos HaGeula. Fine. So now, let's take a look at the second medrash, which I mentioned earlier. So there is another medrash. So the medrash is in Shir HaShirim. There's a pasuk over there in Shir Hashirim regarding the pasuk, Koil doidi, the sound, the voice of my beloved, Hinei zeba, behold, Moshiach is coming. So the Medrash brings, who is my beloved that's coming? The Medrash brings a few different opinions of who is the one that's coming. It's referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. And then he brings Rabbi Yudan b'shem Rabbi Eliezer ben Oisha Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Chunya b'shem Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Oimer Koil doidi, Hinei zeba, Melech HaMoshiach, referring to Melech HaMoshiach. B'shashu Oimer li Yisrael, at the time when he tells the Jewish people, B'chodesh hazeh atem nigalim, in this month you are redeemed. The Yidden give him a hard time. The Yidden start saying, how can we be redeemed? Didn't the Eibishter already promise us that we're going to be mishtabid, we're going to be enslaved to 70 nations? In other words, we like Jews, we haven't done enough yet. We still need more Gullahs. Moshiach is saying, Gullahs, and Yidden are saying, we haven't, we still have work to do. We have to finish this, we have to finish that. So what happens? Moshiach answers them two answers. First answer Moshiach answers them is what? One of you, don't worry, the fact that we have to go around all over the world to be meshubed everywhere, which according to Chassidus means we have to lift the sparks everywhere, so therefore we have to go everywhere. Don't worry. One of you will go to one country, the other one of you will go to the other country, the other person will go to the other country, and it's going to be considered as all of you were everywhere. That's Mashiach's answer. Answer number one. Answer number two, there is this one country that you're all enslaved by. There's one country where Jews are, which all the other countries give taxes to this country. So therefore, by you being enslaved by this place, it's as if you're being enslaved to everybody. Interesting answer. These are the two answers. So here too, there is a description and medrash that Moshiach himself comes to tell the Yidden that the time of redemption has come, and there's a dialogue between Moshiach and the people. So a very interesting thing is, and this is what the Rebbe is referring to, the second measure, the Rebbe actually puts Shir Hashirim, the Rebbe quotes this medrash, when the Rebbe says it's a time when Hinei zeba. What's Hinei zeh? Whenever it says zeh in the Torah, it means what? The Rebbe always would say it. You can point with your fingers and identify. Hinei zeh Melech HaMoshiach. Here he is, Melech HaMoshiach. And the Rebbe said that now that we're holding after Chodesh Nisan, we're already in the time from not only B'shasha Melech HaMoshiach ba, but we're actually in the time when we point with the finger and say, Hinei zeh ba. And the Rebbe is saying that in Chodesh Sivan. He's referring to something that happened in Nisan. In the end of Chodesh Nisan, he says specifically, in the end of Chodesh Nisan. So what happened in the end of Chodesh Nisan? In the end of Chodesh Nisan was the great psak din of the Rabbanim. From all over, the Rabbanim at the Rebbe's Becheskas Mashiach. When did they sign it actually? The first beginning of it? Lamed Nisan. And that's when the whole thing about identifying the Rebbe as Mashiach began, and Yechi started to be sung quietly, louder, so on and so forth. It was all then at that Nisan time. And the Rebbe says, Kvar, Hinei zeh ba, Kvar ba, es schon gekommen. Now, we take a look in Parshas Mishpatim that year, Taka, Tafshin Nun Aleph. The Rebbe says over here clearly, page 330 in Sefer HaSichos, in der Minui von David Malka Mashiach is doch schon gewesen. The appointment of David Malka Mashiach happened already. He was already appointed. K'mo shekasav matzasi David Avdi b'shemen kachi mishachtiv. The Eibishter had appointed him. The only thing that's not necessary now is that the people should accept him and recognize his malchus. Es darf na sein Kabbalah's malchus ayadei am, and the iskashrus, the connection between the melech with the am, between the melech and the. I'm not talking over here sichos that were not muga. I'm talking about all these sichos that were actually printed and written. And Idafka didn't bring the book Besuras HaGeula, so you shouldn't say it was some crazy person who put together the book. I'm talking about the brown books that is our bloodline. These brown sfarim of the old time, Lakutei Sichos, Sefer HaSichos. This is the stuff that created our entire identity as Chabad Chassidim, our entire philosophy. And here we have, and now, this goes so far, that in Tafshin Nun Aleph, in the end, Shabbos Parsha Shoftim, the Rebbe goes ahead and develops an entire sikha, building after building, where the Rebbe speaks about how Nevuah must come back to the Jewish people as part of the simanim of the Geula. And therefore a prophecy must come back. And the Rebbe says, and brings it from the Rambam, that what, in Geras HaTeimon, Ein Sofik, there is no doubt, Shechazares HaNevuah, that the return of prophecy, Hu Akdamas HaMoshiach. And the Rebbe says how it's Negeya. The Rebbe sits and he builds it, block by block. It doesn't, chas v'shalom, people sometimes, because of the confusion, because of the Hell and the Hester, because of probably the biggest Nisayan of all of history, and you can understand, why shouldn't there be a very big Nisayan? It's going to be a big Nisayan, because it's the ultimate moment. It's the moment of truth. So it gets blurry, it gets difficult, it gets hard, and I myself was deeply, deeply confused. Thank God the Eibishter hat mir geholfen that just a few years ago I came across a little black sefer, which, wow, and I always believed it in my soul, but I couldn't articulate, I couldn't give expression to it because I didn't have the whole picture. The Sefer in Yarchei Moshiach, which I believe personally is an obligation for every chassid to learn from cover to cover. So when you learn it, suddenly you see, wow, there's a big picture. And anyways, so over there, the Rebbe builds mamish this Indian about Nevuah. That I know. So chas v'shalom, sometimes people think that maybe chveis, it was, I don't even want to say that the Rebbe was, he's 90 years old already. He wants Mashiach all his life, and it wasn't happening. So, but when you see the brilliant guy, first of all, we relied on every tenua of the Rebbe. First of all, when Yid knows what a Rebbe is, that a Rebbe is Shchina Medaberes Mitech Groinoi, and every movement is a pure keli and an expression, as the Rebbe himself says, to Atzmos himself. I mean, how can we even entertain the silliness like that? But here the Rebbe sits literally, and he builds it up with an incredible goiness, an incredible genius, how he builds step by step, and the Rebbe says that Nevuah is going to return, and how the Baal Shem Tov was already the return of Nevuah, and that Nevuah and prophecy got stronger and stronger, and then the Frierdiker Rebbe is a Navi, and then he says, the Rebbe says that this that he's telling the Jewish people that we're holding by Zman Gulaschem, the time of the redemption, he is not saying it as a rabbi, he's not saying it as a chacham, as a wise person, as a Talmud chacham in Torah, but he's telling it to us in a manner of a nevuah. Oh, this is a nevuah, which means, and the Rebbe teaches us, that means that he heard it from the Eibishter himself. Hear these words? That he heard it, and he's saying who the Navi is. He's saying how the Frierdiker Rebbe is a Navi, and then it continues through his Talmidim. You got to be really dense not to figure out who he's talking about when he says that his Talmidim that are continuing after him. And what does he say? Here we are, Shoftim. Just a few words. V'dosas b'negayetz in a sidareinu, harehu b'cheskas novi, v'ein ze hasheni tzarech hakira, you can't investigate him. Medarfim folgen gleich, take of him a yad, before he even makes a sign. In osser lachshoiv achrov ulaharer b'neviyosoy, moi gewald. It's forbidden to rethink his nevuah. It's forbidden even to think that maybe it's not true. Can we ask ourselves where we're holding with this prohibition? I don't want to make anybody heavy on the heart, but can we say that we're innocent from this of rethinking? His nevuah is really a nevuah? Now, had I come here 5 years ago and started reading this to you, you would say, okay, and maybe you'll say that now as well. But I'm going to tell you like this: I feel very comfortable now. Why? We see that Rebbe said in Parshas Mishpatim that who is going to be the one who's going to fix all the empires? The Rebbe says fixing the world is only going to be done by Moshiach Tzidkenu himself. That's not the business. It's not our business. The fixing of the nations, the Rebbe in Parshas Mishpatim, the Rebbe speaks about that. This is the job of Moshiach Tzidkenu himself. So when we watch today, a ganze Welt kehrt sich über, literally, at the moment where the Rebbe was speaking about before that they want to march on Yerushalayim, comes the whole thing gets a chakerib, it turns over. And for some reason, the only name that is mentioned regarding all of this is one person, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So it's mentioned on the White House, and so it's mentioned in the UN, and so Bibi Netanyahu mentions him in the UN, and so Goldstein in the White House, and this one over here, and this one over there, non-stop mentioning. And where does Ivanka and then Jared go a day before the election, and it's publicized for the whole world? Dafke to the Rebbe. It's not one time the Munkacher Rebbe, and the other day the Spinker Rebbe, and the other day, why not share the, come on, there's a lot of Gedolei Yisrael. It doesn't happen because we're not dealing with something that has to do with Rabbanim time we're talking about the transformation of the world that has to be transformed in the end of days. It's done by Melech HaMashiach. Now that we're seeing all of this happening, can we be honest with ourselves and go back to the Sichos and say, did the Rebbe tell us? And the Rebbe actually knows that we're going to have a problem with this. He knows it. And therefore he says, right over here in the very same page, that people are going to say, how can this go by so smoothly? What are the people in the house going to say? What are my cousins going to say from Lakewood? What is this one going to say? What are the people going to say about this? Is there anything? What's the answer that Rebbe says? If the inyanim of the Geula didn't happen yet, they're not yet in the world, they're still outside of the world, then you would have a question, how's it going to happen? The Rebbe says, everything is already drawn down. Everything happened. Everything is here already. The only thing that's needed now is that we have to open our eyes and start realizing it. The way I see it is, you have a room is set up in a certain way, but it's dark and no one is noticing it. And there is a dimmer, and you start opening the dimmer, and suddenly it starts becoming more light and more light and more light. And that's what happens when you learn the Sichos. And then suddenly you realize that Perek Lamed Vav in Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about Klipas Noiga being refined, and once it's elevated, it cuts off all the dark forces. You start seeing it. That's what's happening in the world. Hey, when the Rebbe says that the coarsest things in the world are going to become allies to Kedusha, and that's Gematria 770, because it's the power of 770 to do that. And you start seeing it happening in the world. Say, oh my, well, he was right. He's been saying this all along, and it's happening. So now the question is, what's our participation? Maybe we need to go back to the Sichos. Maybe we need to restudy them again. Seriously, learn them. Say, what did our Rebbe say? Maybe we're responsible to teach this. You say it's impossible to be spoken. Shluchim are very afraid to speak about this. They're scared, okay? People got scared. So I'll tell you that I was in a shul here in this community this past Shabbos. Maybe it helped me that I had a shtreimel, but I was in a shul very, very far from Chabad in terms of ideology and philosophy and so forth. And I spoke there twice, and I warmed everybody up once and twice. And the last message at the very end, when everybody was really, really paying attention and fully there and engaged, I told them that how do I know that everything that I'm telling you is absolutely right and correct? I was talking about anti-Semitism, and on the one hand, there's so much anti-Semitic things. On the other hand, there's a change. So I said, because the Lubavitcher Rebbe said in 1990, 1991, that Moshiach is about to come, and that it's about to happen, and I said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that that's a prophecy. And I watched them looking at me, and I said, yeah, he said it's a prophecy. And I explained that the Rebbe said how prophecy is going to come back before Mashiach comes, and that there's a Navi, and he's telling this as in a manner of prophecy, which a manner of prophecy is not shakeable, it's unquestionable. That means he heard it from the Eibishter himself. And I said it for the shul, and guess what? No one protested, no one questioned. I don't know if everybody walked away and believing what I just said, but they didn't. They were by because it was given over, especially today's age where you can see this changes, things happening. And then you hear, at least I planted a doubt in their head, maybe taka, efshe taka. And if we as Lubavitchers would mobilize together a little bit, more of us together, more of the powerful heads in Lubavitch, more of the power, and teach more. And by the way, I just wanted to share with you, I know I'm getting a few minutes over time, but I wanted to share with you, the Medrash says over there that when Mashiach will come, two things. People don't believe him, and he says, look at my light that is shining. So there's 2 or 3 sichos in Nun Aleph and Nun Beis, where the Rebbe sits the entire sicha, and he's talking and explaining to us what kind of accomplishments the 7th generation has accomplished, more than all the other generations before that, and how we've reached the entire world, and how from 770, Dafka, the lowest parts of the... I'll give you just an example. Chav Ches Sivan, the Rebbe's entire sicha is about, take a look at my light that is shining over the whole world. Amazing. In Tafshin Nun Beis, again a sicha like that, in Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel. And the Rebbe builds it piece by piece. Take a look how Lubavitch is conquering the whole world, and the whole world is transforming, and everything is being elevated, and everything is changing. That's number one. So you have a few sichas like that. Mamash to diet. If you don't believe me, what does it mean Mashiach's light? Oidi. His light means his pu'ulas, his effects, his actions. And the Rebbe sits the entire Sikha explaining that if you're not chapping what's going on, if what I told you 50 years ago, when Tafshin Yud, that I mean business, and I'm the 7th one, Basi Lagani, that needs to bring the Shekhinah down, So now let's go back and let's look at the last 40 years and let's see what has been accomplished. So let's see where we are now. It's amazing. But another amazing thing is, I'm concluding with this, it says that Moshiach has the dialogue, and he says to the Yidden, they don't believe him, and he says to them two things. He says, because they say, we haven't been around everywhere. So he says that what? That no, one of you go over here, one of you go over there. So first of all, who's the one who put the Jewish people one over here and one over there and one over there? That never happened in Jewish history until the Rebbe went and put Yidden. But an aside for that, in Parshas Vayeshev, the Sikha that the Rebbe gave, a stunning Sikha again, Parshas Vayeshev, Tashin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe begins the Sikha that what? We're talking now lately that Moshiach is mamish here and about to come, so on and so forth. So people are asking the question, how can it be for Moshiach to come? There has to be godliness revealed in the whole world. Where do we see that the whole world is already ready for Moshiach? So the Rebbe builds the Sikha and it gives two answers. And if you listen to the Rebbe's answers, you see that's mamish the two answers that the Medrash says Moshiach is going to answer the Jewish people. Answer number one, the Rebbe says, is that in the early days, Yidden lived right next to Eretz Yisrael, and some Jews lived further. But just recent history, the Rebbe says, there are Yidden spread over the entire world. There's communities all over. And especially there are at least a few Yidden in every place that are Mekayim Torah mitzvahs, and this is never before in all of history. That's answer number one. Number two, the Rebbe says, France was always the darkest of all places. In a sense, French, culture became like the model for everybody to try to follow whatever. And the Rebbe says it was such a difficult klippa. But recently, even France was elevated. Sarfas, Gematria Ufaratsta from 770, it was elevated, and therefore, so mamish that same answer, that all the nations are contingent onto one country, one place, and when that is completed, everything is elevated. So, just to conclude, again, I don't think unless, there's no unlesses. The Rebbe told us then, like it is, in the last, in Vayera and in Parshas Chayesara the next year, Tavshin Nun Beis, Yud Aleph Elul first. This is not a mugad. There's one sikha that's not mugad that I'm quoting today. In Yud Aleph Elul, the end of Nun Aleph, the Rebbe said that what was the lashon over there? Mashiach Tzedkenu, Kvoid Kedushas, whatever. Was already in his Geula, and who kvar his Geula b'maloi tokvoi. He was already revealed in all of his strength and all of his power. That was a lashon. But in Perek in Tavshin Nun Beis, Parshas Vayera, and in Parshas Chayesara, the Rebbe very clearly spells out that we have already Moshiach here, and not just Moshiach, we have already the Izgalus of Moshiach, the revelation of Moshiach. And then when the Rebbe is talking about the Kinnis HaShluchim, the Rebbe is spelling it out. He's not talking Moshiach as just an era in the world, as just happenings. He's connecting it very much to a Melech mi Beis David, and he's connecting it to Chasidim that are Chayolei Beis David. These are the armies of David HaMelech. And he says we're holding already in the third generation in which we've completed all the work of the army, and now Moshiach is ready. And then he goes ahead and he says, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe, who is the I think the Nasi HaYachid was the lashon over there. He has three things over there. He uses here. I have it here. Just to quote the lashon the Rebbe uses over here in Parshas. Wrong one. Nun Aleph. Nun Beis. Where are we? Nun Beis Aleph. This is thank you. Nun Beis Aleph. He uses the lashon over here. Is verstandig as that in our generation. He says, "Al pi ados kvoid kedushas marichami admin asidareinu." That ain't sixter shliach shebedereinu, the only shliach in our generation. That ain't sikir Moshiach shebedereinu, the only Moshiach in our generation, and that everything has already been completed. So it's understood that we're already at the beginning when shlach no biyat tishlach, the shlichus from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Okay. Interesting. In these 2 weeks, the Rebbe, even though he's mentioning very clearly who he's referring to, he's still blaming it on the Frierdiker Rebbe. But when you come later on in the year, in the second half of Nun Beis, in the last sichus, there the Rebbe is already dropping hints much stronger. And the Rebbe basically says right over here, the Yarchei Shloime ben Geula Dereinu Zeh, this is in Parshas Yisroi, as in the Zel Bedoid Hoitman de Gilui von alle drei, we have the revelation of all three, from the word Miyad, all in one generation. Who's Mem? Rosh Tevis Moshiach. Miyad is Rosh Tevis Moshiach. Yud is Rosh Tevis from the Friediger Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak. And Dalid is either Doiram or Doiv Ber, the Friediger Rebbe. Now, over here, Rebbe Rashab, yeah. And here, when it comes to the Mem, the Rebbe has to put it in. That Mem is Rosh Tevis Mashiach, and at the bottom, Eleheir Shemenachem Shemoy. And just that you know, just in case, you might think he's talking about Menachem Finkelstein or Menachem, but Menachem Shemoy. The Rebbe repeats it a few times, again and again, especially Parshas Mishpatim, Miyad, he says, in a way that's closest to us, Mashiach, Menachem Shemoy, so on. The Rebbe said it. And so what I'm saying is, did we miss something? Did we miss? The Besuras HaGeula wasn't just the Besuras HaGeula of wishing. The Besuras HaGeula was a complete, serious Besuras HaGeula which came to its fullest completion. That I'll say, if that's the case, and that Bias HaMoshiach happened already according to this. Bias HaMoshiach happened already according to this. Why don't we have Geula of Moshiach? How can it be? Well, that too, in the very same Medrash I quoted to you before, the Medrash speaks of Mashiach being revealed, and then being concealed, and then being revealed again. And the Rebbe himself says it, and the Rebbe asks a question in Lekut Sichos Chelik Tes. The Rebbe asks a question, can we say in the Rambam, because the Rebbe follows Rambam always, halacha, can we say in the Rambam that Mashiach will be revealed, and then will that fit with the Rambam? And the Rebbe proves that it fits even with the Rambam. That Mashiach is revealed and hidden and then revealed. Why? Because the Rambam uses Bar Kochva as the ultimate sign of, as the example of Mashiach, and Bar Kochva was hidden for a couple of months. So you'll say all of this works as long as you're dealing with a few months. But when you're dealing with 20, 30 years, can't be. It's too much. I agree with you, it's too much. No one is comfortable with the situation. But check out, on your own, check out the last Rashi in Daniel, where Rashi talks about this, that when Pasuk says, Ashrei Amachake, how fortunate are those who are going to wait. It's going to be difficult to wait. Those are going to wait it out. Rashi says it's talking about a specific time when it's going to be hard to wait. And Rashi says it's talking about the time between Mashiach's first revelation and his second revelation. And he announces a numbers of years over there, and I'm going to say that we didn't pass that amount of years. And Chas v'Shalom shouldn't have to pass that time of year, but he does give, and I don't want to make anybody shver von Hartz. And I'm just saying that the concept shouldn't slug us up just because it took a little longer than we've expected. That means that it's not real. It's very real. And the Rebbe actually says in the Sikha, and I'm sorry, keeping you 15 minutes longer, but tomorrow we have other things to talk about. How do you take this down into Poyol Mamish? That's what I want to talk about tomorrow. But in the Rebbe says, very interesting, that this Besuras HaGeula, the Rebbe says that we're obligated to tell the whole world. Here in Parshas A, it's just worth hearing this. The Rebbe says that this Besuras HaGeula, that we are obligated in telling the whole world, that we have to tell the entire world. This has to be gamal yedei ela, also through these people. Sha'ad toyanim sha'adayin loy niklat inyan zeh b'shleimus b'havana v'hasaga v'akarish lem. It has to be even by people who complain that they don't get it yet. They can't understand it. The kivan shegam etzlam yeshne inyan amuna. Since be'amuna every person has, because this is the emes. So the amuna is really there inside of them. Yecholim, so even they are capable, and they too need to be involved in spreading this. Heicham ibnei Beisai and others, and he says other people don't have to suffer because you can't wrap your mind around it. That's what he says. It didn't register in your mind, and therefore the Rebbe says every single Jew needs to hear this. 2 weeks ago I was in New Jersey at a place, Shliach. And I spoke, and I was scared to talk about Mashiach because I didn't know where especially with your current events, and you deal with liberal Jews, you don't know. So I kind of kept it like, I spoke about other things. It was really I spoke about the idea that I guess gave here, and I'm going to give tomorrow about Hasidim and pickles. A whole nice title, but bothers me when we're dealing with such an important time to talk. And in the end, they started questioning me. Before you know it, they pulled it out of me. The people that were there, and we had there was 30, 40 Jews, totally like non-religious Jews. And once I started telling them about the events that are happening in the world, what's going on, it was like, they were like, wow, thank you. Like, almost like the question was, why hasn't everybody told this to us till now? Like, we're waiting, what's going on? We're so confused. This world is hurting us, it's paining us. So, and we're going to be quiet. So we can't be quiet, and I'm not here to harp on the past. I'm saying that we need to do something. We see all these miracles. We need to step up to the plate. So first of all, we need to know them. We need to understand it. And then we have to be able to create within ourselves an understanding and an ability to teach, spread the word, and to share it with others. And Ezras Hashem, just the hachlata to make it happen will assist in the full and completion of the... One thing we know, I keep on saying another thing. The Rebbe, the Rashag, when they asked, when there's a question of who's going to be Rebbe, and the Rashag was still thinking, maybe he would be Rebbe, right? It was so then when did the Rashag concede? When did the Rashag concede? He conceded when the Rebbe, or at least he said that when they asked the Rebbe a question, the Rebbe said, I'm going to ask the Shver. I'm going to speak to my father-in-law, I'm going to speak to the Friediger Rebbe. So he said, Ein Zach I know about him. Arligen it is nisht. He doesn't tell any lies. So if he said, if I can't communicate with the Friediger Rebbe, but if he could, then he's Rebbe and not me. Right? So if the Rebbe comes and gives us sichos and tells us that he's communicated with the Eibishter, right? He's telling you he's a Navi, and he spoke to the Eibishter, and Egias Mangulaschem, so I can guarantee you that he's telling you the emes. And if he's telling you the emes, there's no such a thing that it's failed and it's not going to happen. It's going to happen. And not only it's going to happen, it's happening. And during this whole time that we thought the Rebbe went off the scene and he's just good for Kvitlach to ask him for our personal matters, he went behind the scene and turned over the whole world, and he's doing it right now. He's just waiting for us to open our eyes and say, Rebbe, Baruch haba Melech HaMoshiach. So let's have it now.